Oh, got it. Let's get the agenda. Good morning. Welcome to the Public Safety Committee. Today is Tuesday, February 16th. I'm the chair, Councilmember Mitchell Englander. I'm joined by my colleagues as well, Councilmember Mitch O'Farrell and Mike Bonin. Thanks for being here on time as well. We have one agenda item for this meeting, and by design, only one agenda item, and that is a motion relative to the Los Angeles Police Department and the Los Angeles Police Protective League reporting on the analysis of the recommendations for addressing and increasing crime levels. Before we get started, and I'm going to bring the department up first to give an overview and a presentation of this, I'd like to say that this is very serious in terms of an uptick in crime, and I know we're all incredibly concerned about looking at this and getting in front of it, not behind it. I also know that we're all on the same page in terms of looking for solutions, and the idea of this committee meeting, the very first of its kind, where we're bringing the department and the league together, is very unique. But it's not unique that we all seek the same resolution. To get in front of it, to make sure that the most important thing we do as a city, as a government, as a department, is that we solve crimes, we get in front of them to make sure that crime does not increase. The most important thing we do is to prevent the crime from happening in the first place, to make sure that our communities are safe and people are protected here in Los Angeles. And with that, there are a number of recommendations, I'm sure, putting all of our heads together with the best practices and looking at things we can do to make sure, in fact, we are in front of it and responding to it. With that, though, I don't want to give a long opening other than because I want to really afford the time and opportunity to have a valid discussion and look at some of those opportunities and where we can all get together to affect some change and make sure that there are things within our control and there are things outside of our control as it relates to policing the city, crime, working with the community, all the various community-based organizations, faith-based organizations. It takes all of us. It's not up to the department to solve the problem on its own. It's not up to elected officials or the Police Protective League. They're the folks that actually fight for and protect the very people that put their lives on the front line to protect us. And for that, we're grateful. We also know that crime is often like a pendulum, and it swings both ways. And we've been very fortunate, and not by accident, that over many years we've seen a dramatic decrease in crime, but we're seeing the spike coming back into our communities. And certainly are things that are in control, and again, things outside of our control. The question becomes, how do we get involved in both to make a difference? And I know it's a very difficult situation and topic because there's no magic wand. There's no easy, quick fix. There's not one solution. There's not just one easy remedy. So it takes so many different programs, opportunities, responsibilities, funding mechanisms, community involvement, participation, and so many different elements that have to come together perfectly, all the time, consistently. And then right when it's working, it doesn't work and we have to change it again. So recognizing that, I want to just go ahead and get started. But before we do, and we'll open it up for general public comment, if you have a general public comment card, or a specific, I should say, comment card on item 1, I don't believe we have any general public comment cards? No, sir. Okay, seeing none, if there's anybody here on general public comment, we don't have any cards in? Okay, then we'll go ahead and close general public comment. And we'll go into item 1. Before we do that, I was going to give my colleagues an opportunity to open as well if they wanted to. Let's get ready. We're good? Okay. So with that, we have one card from Alice Goff. Morning, ma'am. And no other cards. Then we're going to go ahead and close submission for item 1 for cards as well.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
So, Alice Goff with AFSCME, Local 3090. We represent clerical and support services employees throughout the city, but a large number in the police department. Back in 1981, I was part of 200 police service representatives that were brought into Communications Division on the same day in January of '81. It was the largest civilianization plan, and what that did was to allow officers who at that time took calls from the citizens to go back into the field. It was believed that civilians could not do that job because they couldn't be properly trained to do it, as only officers could recognize what the elements of a crime were. Well, we know now that that is not the case. It's actually just the opposite today. Support staff is not being hired, and instead officers are doing jobs traditionally done by civilians. Critical positions in the records units, those positions are critical because they allow for information to be inputted into the various law enforcement systems, and instead officers now do some of that work themselves, and or they drive further to division where there is staffing for their work to be done. Similarly, in Communications Division, PSRs have not been hired. There was a class last year, and there was one going through now, but the training time for that group of employees is so long that right now the rate of overtime being used to staff is just really, really significant, not to mention the burnout on the staff there. So back when we were in contract negotiations, we looked at this, the coalition of unions, and it's anywhere from 20 to 71% higher higher costs to put an officer into a civilian position. And so we just ask that we consider that. In addition, that if the department is not, doing that presentation today, what numbers, how many civilian positions are currently staffed by officers so that they can, in fact, be relieved to go back into the field? Thank you.
No, thank you very much. And I know we're going to be talking a lot about that today as well. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it. Now, if we can ask the department and personnel to come up. Good morning. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. And
good morning, Councilman and Councilman Bond and Councilman Farrell. Assistant Chief Michael Moore, Office of Administrative Services. I'm joined by Assistant Chief George Villegas, Office of Operations. We also have Mr. Alican from the Office of Constitutional Policy and Policing, and as well as a number of our bureau chiefs from the 4 geographic bureaus, and Ms. Gloria Gruby from Personnel. We welcome the opportunity to talk with you this morning. I have some prepared, an outline of some prepared remarks. We can go through that, or I can, and then go into questions or whatever your wishes are. I know that there's a presentation. I understand there's a presentation by our colleagues from the Los Angeles Police Protective League, including a PowerPoint presentation, which I've not seen, but so I can make my remarks and then respond to that. What issues will come up from there, however you wish.
why don't we go ahead if you've got some a presentation or at least prepared talking points to walk us through sort of where we're at today in terms of, and I'm sure you can anticipate some of the issues that, or concerns or ideas or even solutions that they're going to address, but walk us through where are we seeing the uptick in crime? What are some of the department's perspectives? What are some of the solutions? What are some of those things that have been implemented, and are they working? And just sort of walk us through. I'm sure you've got some of that in your presentation.
Absolutely. I have an outline.
Very helpful.
It's been responsive to your motion. Okay. And so let's begin, first of all, with the historical perspective. I'll work towards a year in crime as far as report on that, and what our analysis is as to what the increase, what has driven that increase, and then our steps that I've taken to combat that and deal with that. Right. First and foremost, Part 1 reported crime was up more than 12% in 2015. Violent crime increased for the second year in a row. And while any increase is not acceptable, when viewed in a historical context, the crime levels today, as you mentioned earlier, are some of the lowest in the last 50 years. Crime per capita in 2015 was lower than it has been since 1953, when the population of the city was 2 million, compared to 4 million today. 2015 marked the 6th year in a row that homicides were below 300 in the city. And by contrast, in 1992, 1,094 people lost their lives in Los Angeles, and through time, we've seen that number continually reduce. Over the last, prior to the last 2 years, crime in the city of Los Angeles reduced year over year for 12 straight years. And in context, overall reported crime in 2015 represents a 21% decrease in comparison to 10 years ago. However, as I said earlier, this increase, while we want to take it and keep it in a historical perspective, we're not happy with or satisfied by any means. To that end, the department began changing and shifting its focus approximately a year ago today with the increase in violent crime that we saw in 2014. There was an overall reduction in crime in 2014, as I said, the 12th year in a row, but with the increase in violence that we saw, the department began working with our elected officials, including this council, to begin shifting our focus and resources towards that violence. Much can be seen in regards to the last year's city budget, the interim budget, this year's city budget, and the budget that's coming before the council here in May. But in talking about crime in 2015, let me talk about and pull that apart and detangle that a little bit as to what made up that increase in crime. There was a 20% increase in violent crime. We had 283 homicides, which was an increase from the year before, and 165 of those 283 homicides were gang-related. That's seven additional lives that were lost to gang violence last year than the year before. 72%, the majority of increase in violent crime, however, was in aggravated assaults in the city of Los Angeles. And in looking at where those aggravated assaults, what drove those numbers, 50% were either spousal, so domestic violence related, or gang related. In our gang-related crimes, we saw shots fired and victims of shooting increase by 20%. And overall gang crime increased nearly 15%. In looking at where the crime was occurring in the city of Los Angeles now, we know that aggravated assaults represented 70% of the increase in violence. In looking at where the crime was occurring, we know it was domestic violence and gang assaults. But in looking at ground, we saw the largest increase in the downtown central area, which had the highest numeric and percentage increase of aggravated assaults citywide. 61% of that increase of what the increase in central area were occurred in the Safer Cities area commonly known as Skid Row. Overall, when we looked at domestic violence, we saw an overall increase in domestic violence. Again, I said it fueled 30% of our increase in violence. But the shining spot of that, or the bright spot, if any, was in the seriousness of those assaults appeared to be much less than the numbers would suggest. And what I mean by that is stricter interpretation of what constitutes an aggravated assault versus the year before, we believe drove a portion of the increase in the size of the increase in domestic violence for aggravated assaults. What I mean by that is when you look at the number of domestic violence homicides in the city of Los Angeles, last year it was 7. The year before it was 14. And so the seriousness, while domestic violence and any instance of domestic violence is a serious assault, the level of injury on those were much lower, a much lower threshold, of a stricter threshold.
Have you been, and I don't want to interrupt because I want you to go through this, and I know everybody's got questions, but just on that particular item, because that's come back in a lot of questions and folks asking, is it because the Los Angeles Police Department is now defining and recording aggravated assaults differently or in more parallel or context to what FBI regulations or standards are? I mean, there's been a lot of attention to that in the last couple years.
We believe a portion of the increase, first of all, we believe overall in violence has increased. The number of shootings that have increased, the gang violence that has increased, but in the domestic violence and general ag assault world, the overall number of assaults has increased about 7% in the city of Los Angeles. I mean, this issue of defining an aggravated assault or a simple assault is a uniform crime reporting standard standard that the organization voluntarily cooperates with the FBI in reporting our crime stats so that our numbers can be compared to major cities and other agencies across the country to understand how is crime occurring in Los Angeles versus how it's occurring someplace else. Beginning in 2014, going into 15, the organization increased its vigilance and continually. We've always looked at the accuracy of our reports, what makes a simple assault versus what makes an aggravated assault. But last year it was on hyper power and areas that were now considered aggravated assaults that before were not were two particular ones: brandishing a weapon of any type and choking of an individual that resulted in, it can be interpreted as strangulation or a person's intent to strangle someone. Those are areas that in the past could have easily been classified as a simple assault. Last year we saw those shift into the aggravated assault, which then, in comparison to years prior, looks like there's a surge in domestic violence and a surge in aggravated assaults when a portion of it, not all of it, but a portion of it was stricter interpretation.
Do you know what that portion is, percentage-wise?
It's difficult to understand. Our percentages is when we audit, and as we continue to audit our simple assaults, we saw error rates in the area of 8 to 9% of our overall simple assaults. Those numbers then shifted to aggravated assaults, and they had a disproportionate impact because aggravated assaults make a small portion of the total assault population. But I don't want to get pulled, if I could, off too much on stricter interpretation. Stricter interpretation is responsible for a portion of our increase in violence, but it is not the entire story, and by no means. Increase in gang assaults, increase in violence in the street, those are realities that we saw in 2015 and go to what we're doing in response to that violence. Additionally, we also believe that in domestic violence, an increase was a result of one of the strategies invoked last year by the Mayor's Office with support of this council, which was a doubling of DART teams, domestic abuse response teams, across all 21 areas, where these teams made up of clinicians and a police officer work and handle victims of domestic abuse. As that outreach effort and as that engagement occurs, we believe that strategy, in concert with a broader community awareness of domestic abuse, has also brought more people to us to report crime. Domestic abuse, as is sexual assaults, traditionally a very underreported crime. Now, so I've given you two prongs. One is stricter interpretation. One is an outreach effort with domestic abuse. But as we look to, and I want to speak briefly about property crime, but for violence, it's aggravated assaults, 70% of the problem. Domestic violence, family violence, coupled with gang assaults and street violence. Those are the areas that we saw the increase in 15. When we look at property crime, the increase was in auto-related thefts. The first time that we saw auto thefts increase in more than 10 years. And so 70% of our increase in property crimes occurred in auto theft. Within that, there were, of the motor vehicle, thefts from motor vehicles, half of the increase in thefts from motor vehicles were of unlocked vehicles. So we looked, and as we looked at our efforts in combating crime, with an overall 12.6% increase, in summary, as we move through 2015 and now going into 16, we've described a situation where violent crime has increased back-to-back years with relationship to street violence, gang violence, and domestic violence. And driving those factors, part of it is a stricter interpretation, part of it is our outreach, but part of it is, in candor, we believe individuals in gangs that are engaged in more acts of violence against one another and against those in public. Now let's talk about our strategies in moving towards that. First, as far as the cause. As you said earlier, crime is a complex issue. It goes up, it goes down, but the reality of the matter is cops count and police matter. And the policing in this city has driven down and been a collaborative of driving down and making this community safer for more than a decade. Efforts that we have encouraged this council and this city to invest in, the size of this department, the technologies of this department, the training of this department, have proven results. And when crime goes down, everyone wants to run to the front and call it a parade. But when crime goes up, we own that as well. And each of the years that crime went down in the city, we worked feverishly, my colleagues behind me, to identify strategies that we could improve and amplify that reduction, because every reduction means better public safety. But as crime starts turning and as it starts going up, we're also committed to making that positive impact. But we don't control all the factors. In this last year, when people look and say, well, what has changed in crime? One of the things we're looking at is we're now on the 5th, going to 6th year of criminal justice reform in this state. And when you look at criminal justice reform, the promise, the commitment is honorable. It is something that as an individual and as a police professional, I want to see we join and embrace the idea that criminals can be rehabilitated, that individuals who engage in acts of violence and property crime can be, through treatment and through support and services, can leave the life of crime. But in the criminal justice reform, particularly with AB 109 and Prop 47, we have seen somewhat the cart before the horse, meaning that a number of habitual offenders, thousands of habitual offenders, are A, being released back into the community with much less services and supervision, or B, being arrested now for offenses that no longer constitute a felony offense, meaning that their time in incarceration off of the street is greatly diminished, if not eliminated. An example of this is Prop 47. In the first year of Prop 47, which took possession of narcotics into a misdemeanor crime, took some property crimes to misdemeanors instead of what used to be burglaries or used to be a felony. In the first year in LA County, some 43,000 arrests were made of people who would otherwise have been arrested for a felony. They were arrested for a misdemeanor. 21,000 of them were arrested for crimes multiple times. And in those individuals that committed those crimes, there were 11,000 new Part 1 arrests. So the habitual offender, not only do we see the statistics beginning to emerge that here are offenders that are no longer off of the street, and time off the street, frankly, is less opportunity time for them to commit crime, but also there's not the stick or the punishment, if you will, for a consequence of a crime that they commit that they may commit over and over and over again. Now, that was never the intention of Prop 47. That was never the intention of criminal justice reform. And the organization, and as individuals, we remain committed to seeing services and seeing supervision and seeing the support of these individuals so that they can be directed away. But when you look at one of the underlying influences, we believe that the nature of the habitual offender. Lastly, to not harp on this, but to talk about the habitual offender and auto theft. Auto theft, as I mentioned earlier, was auto-related thefts represented 70% of the increase in property crime. When you look at motor vehicle thefts, went up the first time 17% this last year. It's up this year 20%. We look at what type of vehicles are being stolen. 40% of the increase of automobiles stolen last year were vehicles made in the 1990s. Now those vehicles, I have a couple police officers at the table, are the same vehicles that could have been stolen 2 years prior, 4 years prior, 6 years prior. But what changed last year? And what we know also is that those vehicles are typically stolen by either A, juvenile offenders committing joyrides or young gang members that are joyriding and moving about the city, or habitual drug offenders who use a vehicle, whether it be for trade for narcotics or other offenses. So when we look at the analysis and cause, we see the habitual offender playing a major role, and it is shaping our response into 2016. Secondly, we see an increase in homeless population. The well-documented across this city and across this region, and we have seen that that 12% increase, some 29,000 that sleep in the streets or are left to the streets in our communities, are both victims as well as offenders. And they're having an impact on our crime. As I spoke earlier about the increase in violence and where the increase occurred, I'll draw your attention to the fact of 61% of the increase in central area, which made the largest increase in violent crime, occurred in the Skid Row area in safer cities. I mentioned, as far as other causes or influence, the impact of our DART resources, having a greater soliciting and encouraging people to report crime. But let me change gears to two other things. One is a national trend. How does this relate now? So I've given you a historical perspective. I've given you somewhat of a dive into where we were in 2015 in regards to our violence on property. How do we compare across the country and in this region? Well, first of all, as far as the cities, major cities in America, all of them saw increases in homicide in 2015. 3 of the 5 experienced double-digit increases in percentages. As far as 63 major cities that we work with major city chiefs to collect data, because the FBI data is so stale. The FBI data for 2015 will not be out until September. So we are ongoing surveying each quarter now our major cities. Of the 63 reporting, they showed a 16% increase in homicides last year and a 14% increase in non-fatal shootings. Lastly, every major city in California experienced an increase in both violent and property crime. So the context of this is, while historically our crime is at historic lows, it is troubling that it has surged back at us. It is, in perspective, still 23% less violence today than we had in 2005, when the agency had 9,200 police officers versus our 9,921 today. But we're not satisfied, and we believe and we're troubled by this shift of this return to an upswing instead of, or in place of, year after year decline. Strategies that we've embarked on include the development of a 2020 LAPD strategic plan, a 10-point plan, of which the top strategy is reducing crime and victimization, as well as building community trust and collaboration. In the backdrop of this increase in violent crime is also a national discussion on policing and a question about our use of force and about the role of policing in communities. So as an organization, we're shaping our response, continuing it with looking at that strategic plan, which supports the mayor's 4 priority outcomes, and we're shaping our budget, we're shaping our deployment, we're shaping and modeling our programs to address violence first, followed by property crime and overall quality of life. We recognize today that our gang violence is a prime area that requires our focus, as well as homelessness, as well as the victims of domestic violence. And looking at, and I'm moving now to specific strategies for that. There's been controversy. I know we sit here today in controversy relative to the expansion of Metropolitan Division, the doubling of that to double our ability to do crime suppression. Let me speak briefly about that. The Metropolitan Division historically has had, when we look at their deployment, trained, uniformed police officers that can be used for both crime suppression activity in a uniform and plainclothes capacity, but also used for tactical responses of a variety of things beyond crime suppression, meaning crowd control, civil disobedience, response to terrorist events, and et cetera. So in this last year, as we saw an increase of crime violence in 14, moving into 15, decision was made, and which I fully support, which is to expand Metro's crime suppression capabilities. As we looked across our landscape, each of the bureaus ran violent crime task forces or crime suppression task forces or various ad hoc efforts to deploy people, police officers, trained on hotspots as spikes occurred. What this effort allowed us to do was consolidate that into an organizational unit that we could properly equip, that we could properly train, and that we could move across those spikes across the entire city. And in doing so, it was accomplished in a period of time that I had never seen in my 35 years. The idea came in by April. It was fully implemented by October. And that was not just the personnel, but that was the required equipment and training. With that, undoubtedly, are growing pains. With that, in the first year of its full implementation, I'm sure that we'll see further adjustments. But the essence of why we're doing it is that as gang violence or as street violence erupts in a city or corner of a community of this city, is our ability to put 100+ officers that are working 7 days a week across 20 hours a day on one of those positions or on multiple positions. Daily today, we have 8 squads of officers working. A year ago, we did not have 8 squads of crime suppression details working, certainly not 7 days a week. So this surge allowed us to put resources there that can work across the city. I can talk, if you'd like, about the results, but they're real coddled. Felony arrests doubling, gun seizures up 187%. Their productivity is not just, by the way, in one portion of the city. Previously, the first 6 months of 2015, crime suppression details by Metropolitan Division were in 12 of 21 areas. The last 6 months, they were in 20 of 21 areas. Their deployments went from 250 deployments, if you will, to over 850.
So let me ask you this, and I know we're going to come back to that, and I want to make sure the league comes up and goes through their presentation. I also want to make sure we have time for question and answers. I know we're not going to get through everything in a day.
Okay.
There's no question. There's a lot to talk about. In fact, a lot of the stuff that, Chief, you've just thrown up on the wall, I know we want to do and come back and just have special meetings on some of those issues and ideas and look at some of those reports. Do you have, and I don't know if there's anything that you've put together that you can submit to us on just the Metro in terms of how the plan's rolling out and some of in terms of the operational, what you've deemed successes and arrest numbers and how they're deployed? Anything you can submit to the committee for the next, when we will have that?
We can absolutely provide a report to the committee.
Right.
I can give greater detail if you'd like today as to where they're actually, which areas they've been in, the amount of time they spend in those areas. You know, you talk about felony arrests, 1,664 arrests,
Right.
236 firearms.
Yes, you've got the number. Okay, so coming back, we'll come back to all of that,
Okay.
I think, in
Well, then let me,
very specific detail.
if I might, move to just a couple other nodes of the strategy, because crime suppression initiative of Metro is one, and a very serious and intensive one. By the way, with their utility is also not just for crime suppression. Their utility includes their ability to deal with acts of civil disobedience.
Well, let's do this if we could. Let's have the league come up. I know there's a lot of other initiatives we want to get to and talk about as well, but I want to recognize my colleagues to make sure that they get their questions asked, and I know there's going to be, this is the first of many meetings we're going to have on this, so if that's okay, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Because I've watched the clock ticking, and so I want to make sure that we have ample time to get through their presentations.
We can sit back here?
Oh, that'd be great. If you could, stick around. That'd be terrific. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Morning.
Morning. Morning.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Just want to thank you for having us here, Mitch Englander, and thank you for the Public Safety Committee. Thank the command staff for coming out. I'm Doretta Sandos. I'm Vice President of the Los Angeles Police Protective League, and I have 22 years on the department and 12 years as a supervisor. We're the voice of our members. So I kind of want to talk about why we're here. We're the voice of our members, and they were crying for help. They were crying for help because there were deployment that they felt were in low numbers, crime was going up, and we wanted to make sure that we collectively work with the department to try to come up with some solutions. So although we'll be talking about some challenges, we also want to make sure and let you know that we do have solutions that we are willing to work with the department to come up with. Our members brought serious concerns, and we're lieutenants and below in the league. We don't have bars and stars, but what we do know is that crime is up, and if we keep going down the same road, it's going to be hard to recover. So we will work with the department to try to figure out how to fix that. We have a public safety emergency. That's what we feel that we have right now. And it's time for CPR, which is a community policing reset. Our focus is to reduce crime, assist with reducing crime, improve community relations, and boost officer morale. We agree with Chief Beck. Chief Beck said that one of the reasons why crime has increased is because of Prop 47. So we're not disputing that. That is one of the reasons, but there's many other reasons. And we know that Prop 47 is here. Now we have to figure out how we're going to combat that. We should have had a plan ongoing before this even passed, because it's here now, so we can't rewind it. We need short-term goals. The department has come up with long-term goals. Just mind you, it takes about 2 years to hire a new police officer. 2 years. We all agree that we need more officers, but we can't wait 2 years. Crime is up now. The residents of Los Angeles cannot wait 2 years. So we need to come up with some solutions that are short-term. And we believe, the league believes, that we have some answers to that, and we will work and let you know what those solutions are. Everyone should be concerned that Governor Brown is seeking on the November ballot an initiative to relax mandatory prison sentences. So if you think that crime is up now, if this passes, it's going to be triple. So we have to prepare for that. These are the things that are coming down the line. We have to be concerned about this, and we have to take this very seriously. This slide speaks for itself. And I respect the department. I respect Chief Moore when he stated that we're at a 50-year low, and that in 1953, we're not as bad off as in 1953. With all due respect, I was not born in 1953. The citizens of Los Angeles do not care about what's happened in 1953. They care about what's happening now in 2016. So I understand the historical perspective of 1953 and 50 years ago. We don't care about 50 years ago. What's going on right now in this city is that violent crime from 2014, and just to bring into perspective, 2014 versus 2015, 20% increase in violent crime. That's what the residents of Los Angeles care about. They care about the 8.8% in homicide. They care about the rape going up. They care about every single category that's on this slide.
I'd also like to thank our police chief, Charlie Beck, for being here this morning, too. Thanks for being here.
Also, when we talk about crime in New York and crime in Chicago and crimes throughout the city that's going up, we don't live in New York. We live in Los Angeles. So please bring it back to what we're going to do to help the residents of Los Angeles, what we're going to do to make sure that LAPD officers, the one that we represent, are safe. Because if they're not safe, the community is not going to be safe. Again, we agree with Chief Beck. We cannot police this city properly with the level of police officers we have now. We can't do it. Chief Beck mentioned that at the San Pedro rally. That was February 4th. So we do agree with that. So what are we going to do collectively to, we can't put a Band-Aid on it. Again, it takes 2 years to hire one police officer. Our classes that we've been having in the police academy has not been abundant. So how are we going to get those officers to actually apply for LAPD to make sure we have more police officers on the street? We all want to stay for Los Angeles. As Chief Villegas said at our delegates meeting in 2016, January, we need a minimum of 12,500 police officers. And that's the minimum so that we can operate effectively and efficiently and provide a greater level of service to the community to reduce crime. 12,500 officers. And a member of command staff also said we may need about 17,000, quote, I quote. So, again, we're willing to help, to work. I know that we can't do this in one day, but we're willing to be part of the solution. And I'll turn it over to Lou Terriaga. I'm sorry, Mark Cronin.
Morning.
Good morning. Can I have the controller, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. My name's Mark Cronin. I'm a Los Angeles police officer, very proud to be. Been with this police department for 22 years. Most of it has been spent out, actually on the street. I was a motor cop for 17 years, still am a motor cop, and I'm wearing a suit today to tell you the plight of the patrol officers that are out there. Right now, we frankly are in the people business, but we're not taking care of ourselves internally in an adequate way, and I'm talking about the officers that are actually injured on duty. I personally have had my spine fused, and that hurts. And I cannot tell you how many of our officers are hurt because of this vocation. What we want to do is we want to implement an alternative dispute resolution program. We want to work with the city of Los Angeles to make a system where our officers are fixed and treated like thoroughbreds or athletes and brought back to work quickly. Currently, that's not the case. Right now, this is our reality. Almost 20% of our police department has been impacted by a dysfunctional workers' comp system. These are officers that are not street ready. They cannot go out and they cannot do the function of a patrol officer. That's not to say that they don't have other opportunities given to them and they're not viable, because they are. And let's not forget that they've actually been hurt because of this job. All right? This impacts our deployment greatly. The Los Angeles Police Protective League goal is to immediately treat officers that are injured in the line of duty and return them to work as soon as possible. Again, we want to treat our sworn personnel as prized athletes. Currently, our workers' compensation system is adversarial in nature. It doesn't have to be. Currently, treatments that are prescribed by primary physicians are often denied. You're basically put into a utilization review quagmire of AME, alternate medical examiner, QME, qualified medical examiner, or if you're put into the black hole of IMR, independent medical review, it's not uncommon for it to take 222 days for anything to happen to you. For me personally, I literally was on my back on an ice machine with my feet up on a chair from May until September when my surgery was approved. At the time, I actually had to call a director that was here at the Protective League for him to help me. My phone blows up daily with officers that aren't getting therapy, they're not getting medication, and they're not getting surgeries approved. Let's not forget the retired officers that have given so much that, frankly, are just feeling like they were thrown away. This ultimately causes delays in return, and injuries are not getting back to work in a timely fashion. There have been studies after studies after studies, it seems. There's one that's going to be coming out in April. This is from the Controller's Office. The bottom line is that this costs us a ton of money. This also costs us a ton of hours that we can't count on an officer to be out in the field. We do not have an adequate return-to-work program with performance metrics and a reliable system to evaluate effectiveness. Many injuries and illnesses could have been prevented. We know for a fact that certain things are going to be happening to us in this job, and there are things that we can do to actually prevent it. We should be working towards that. This risk management system and the issues that were impacting us was identified 7 years ago. And frankly, nothing has changed after that controller's report. We can do better. This is costing us a ton of money. We need to make our personal health a priority in this organization. It's not just about money. It's about actual officers that are home that want to be back at work. And that's where we are falling short. Alternative dispute resolution program has been done. It's actually in our neighboring city in Long Beach right now. Currently, like I said earlier, it's not uncommon for 220 days to occur if you're caught up in the independent medical review process. That was what Long Beach was finding with their officers too. And what they ended up doing is they ended up instituting the alternative dispute resolution plan, which cut it down dramatically from 230 days to 59 days. That's treating us like we are prized. All right? This is a big deal, and we want to actually work with the city to make this happen. Officers, bottom line is that we want them to receive timely medical treatment and brought back to work as quickly as possible. Average time, again, for Los Angeles police officers is over 200 hours, or excuse me, 200 plus days. And Long Beach has 59. All right? I'm bringing this forward, and we are actually scheduling meetings with the CAO's office. We have that scheduled, but we need your assistance in making this happen. All right?
So with that, and I know we're going to go through a number of questions, and I just want to let folks know that some of the recommendations and many of the recommendations and suggestions, we're going to do a very deep dive into these and have just meetings on just these particular issues. And we'll have a series of recommendations coming out of this for not only report backs, but having the league as well as the CAO at the table and the department looking at some of these workers' comp issues, revamping some of those ideas and concerns. It's a lot more than obviously going through in a quick presentation, Mark, and I really appreciate that. I know you've spent a long time really studying this issue. We need to do the same at the same table, right? So we're going to do that. And
Thank you.
We're going to do it quickly.
And so we wanted to just kind of bring it full circle, that the league's plan, and hopefully some of this will be implemented, is as simple as ABC. So we have alternative dispute resolution, which Mark just talked about, baseline patrol staffing, hopefully to get the minimums that the council actually discussed in 2007 to have 10 basic ACARs, somewhere along those lines, and then performing civilian work. Okay, and those are the three things that we're bringing forward. And I'll let Lou Terriaga complete it.
So if I can go forward here, talking about the baseline patrol staffing, this is something where we believe we can help reduce crime, improve community relations, and boost officer morale. What you're going to look at here in the next couple of slides is a survey that we did of our membership, and our preliminary results are a little bit troubling. If you notice here, over 85% of our officers believe that they do not have sufficient time to respond to 911 calls. And this is obviously a great need for community policing reset. Again, here, over 85%, they do not feel that they have the ability to conduct sufficient community policing time. I want to make sure that you know that this doesn't reflect the values of community policing. It does reflect, however, their time available to get to it.
How many officers were surveyed? How many responded? And in what time frame was that?
Our window is still open for them to respond, but we have well over, I believe it was 1,200 that have responded so far.
1,200.
Yes, sir.
By what means?
I'm sorry, sir?
By what means were they?
It was sent out electronically by means of email, and their responses have been received.
It was on a Survey Monkey.
So what you're looking at here, there's a Citizens Public Safety Bill of Rights. This was adopted by 10-0 by the Los Angeles City Council. I believe it was initiated by your predecessor, sir. And I wanted to bring a couple of salient points of this forward. To create a minimum patrol deployment plan for every division, to create a budget tracking mechanism so that sworn salaries and overtime are expended for officers assigned a minimum patrol deployment plan. Seeking opportunities to civilianize functions, which we'll cover in just a little bit, and seeking opportunities to consolidate functions within the LAPD to make it easier for them to place more officers back on patrol. Obviously, this is going to go ahead and echo our feelings to create that same minimum patrolment deployment plan, that baseline, that same budget tracking mechanism to seek the opportunities to civilianize the functions and to seek opportunities to consolidate those functions. I want to bring your attention back in 2007 as we were looking at this same plan. We had Councilman Greg Smith who wanted to set minimum service levels to pay overtime to fill these gaps in patrol car staffing. Along the same line, his plan was modeled after the fire departments, which had minimum levels for staffing stations and had used overtime to pay to maintain them. If you notice here, LAPD Assistant Chief of Operations at the time, Earl Pasinger, said he believes the fire department's plan was, quote, very intelligent response to public safety. Nonetheless, our LAPD Deputy Chief Michael Moore, now Assistant Chief Moore, you heard from a little while ago, He said it was a great idea if funds could be found to keep the city's basic patrol cars fully staffed to maintain a speedy response times. Looking at, again, another quote here, you don't want a culture where basic cars are just a response unit going from call to call to call. And if you notice, that's exactly what our officers felt in that same survey, is they felt like they were going from call to call to call. What you're looking at here is one of our prior chiefs, Chief Bratton, now the police commissioner here in New York. His quote, they never have a chance, as far as his officers, they never have a chance to really have time to build relationships, to work on the problems in their neighborhoods. They're indentured to the radio, running again from call to call. In a department that does not have enough police officers, oftentimes and not enough cars out there to handle the calls as they're coming in. And to round this up for you, our civilians performing civilian work, as you heard from the first member of the public there, we can certainly do better here. In 2008, the city controller reported, I believe she was looking for a number. In 2008, that number was identified, 565 potential positions for civilians. I believe the chief's quote was when he was speaking to the harbor, 72 police officers that are currently assigned to our jails. And this is something recent. We have an advertisement for 14 police officer 3s working a social media unit. Time to get a little bit back to basics. Here's a couple of recommendations that were pulled from this report to determine positions or functions which permanent limited light duty sworn officers are currently assigned, whether these sworn officers are performing positions or functions that have been identified in the study as candidates for civilianization. And number 12, develop a long-term implementation plan to civilianize the 565 positions that were identified in the study. The plan should include a robust civilian training program, measurable short, mid-term, long-term goals. This is, again, we are not disagreeing with the chief or the administrative staff. The chief says that he promises to open these jails. The city should have 400 jailers, but he said we were short by 165. This is a capture of that same opening here. So as you can see, job opening police officer 3. They reran 13 of the positions and says note on the bottom, positions may be assigned to the digital media unit. Those are police officer 3 positions that are desperately needed in patrol.
And we say that because there has been a time where we go to divisions all the time, and when there's 2 P1s working with 1 P3, that's an issue. So with the 13 positions for P3s in the digital media unit, which is important, but at this point, our resources have to go where the resources need to go. We can't have 2 P1s working with 1 P3. If there's upgrades, upgrade them in patrol.
So as you can see, that brings a close to our presentation, ladies and gentlemen of the council that are here with us today. What we're trying to bring you is not just problems and highlighting the difficulties that we've had. We're trying to bring you our solutions, very workable solutions that are as easy as, obviously, ABC. And we're looking to you to advise the rest of the council and to give direction to the chief of police, hopefully working with us to move forward on this, not in 5 years, not in 36 months, but there's a great number of these things we can get to very quickly.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much. So what we'll do now is, if you guys can hang around, I'd like to ask the chief to come up for some remarks, and then at that point, what we'll do is we'll just go through and ask my colleagues have some various questions, and I know there's a lot of report backs and doing a much deeper conversation in a lot of these areas and recommendations, and I want to just thank you as well as I did the department. Thank all of you for coming up with some of the ideas and solutions and looking at where we need to go from here, and we'll look at some of those, and all working together, I think, is really the best solution. So, Chief, good morning. Thank you very much for being here.
Good morning. And first, thanks to all of you for taking the time on this issue. It's a really important issue to the city of Los Angeles. Public safety is the first job of government. If our streets are not safe, if our residents are not safe, then we all fail. So, a couple issues here that I think are important. First, the department absolutely agrees the work comp system needs to be reworked, and we will work with the union and with the council and the mayor's office to do that. You know, it is a difficult function that is handled outside the department, and sometimes needs don't get met because the the care provider, the intermediary, is sometimes slow by our standards. So we do need to fix that. I think it's extremely important. Civilian staffing. After the recession, we not only downsized the police department, we laid off over 40 civilians, but we also quit hiring. And that has had a tremendous impact on the Los Angeles Police Department, even though we are back to hiring now. But, once you turn off that spigot, it takes a long time to fill the pool back up. By way of information, we have right around 3,000 civilians assigned to the Los Angeles Police Department, and that's over 600 short of what our table of organization calls for. So, yes, there are a lot of us that do jobs that could be done by civilians. Full time, we have at least 75 officers that could be immediately replaced by civilians were we able to hire those civilians. And I talk primarily about the jail. So there are additional detention officers, jailers, in this coming budget. We are working with personnel department to be able to hire those folks. It won't get us to where we need to be, but it'll get us closer to where we want to be. Obviously, as you're all very aware, we have closed 5 jails during the recession. Those jails are still closed, and in order to keep one of our major central jails open, we have those 72 officers assigned there. I think it's important to recognize the diversity of functions that the Los Angeles Police Department has. Answering 911 is certainly one of those things. Detective work is certainly one of those things. Being able to respond to terrorist incidents is certainly one of those things. Building community trust, huge goal of mine this year, and we need to put resources into that too. But we'll put this in perspective. So Los Angeles Police Department has just short of 10,000 officers. We're about 100 short of our budgeted deployment. That is a ratio of 25 officers per 10,000 in the city of Los Angeles. That's how many cops you have per resident. In New York, in Chicago, and in Philadelphia, other major metropolitan centers in this nation, they have 45 officers per 10,000. All of those cities have budgets that per resident far outstrip the Los Angeles Police Department's budget. The city of Los Angeles has been policed historically with a very thin blue line. And I think that as we see changes in our criminal justice system, Prop 47, and others that increase the challenges for policing, as we see homelessness increase in the city, as we see crime increase across the state and even the nation, we have to look at the size of the Los Angeles Police Department and reevaluate. And so I think this is an important start to that discussion. Our strategic plan, which covers up until 2020, recommends expanding the police department to 12,500 over that time period. Obviously, even if the city magically found the funds to support that, we couldn't hire, background, and train that many people over a short time period. But we need to recognize the shortcomings of having too small a police department. And so I think this is an important start to that discussion. I don't agree necessarily with everything that the union says, nor would you expect me to. But I do agree with their premise that we need to fund the Los Angeles Police Department at a higher level. Now, the council's challenge, of course, as you all are well aware, is how do you do that? And so I think that we have to have an intelligent discussion about that, chart our course forward, recognizing that this problem won't be solved tomorrow, but if we start working on it, it can be solved. And I thank you all very much for listening to me. Unfortunately, this is a day for police commission for me, so it's important that I get back across the street. maybe if the committee had a question or two for me before I leave, that would be good. Then Chief Moore and Chief Villegas are here, and they are more than able to represent me in my absence.
All right. Thank you, Chief. Open it up to any of my colleagues for any questions.
I know your time is brief, so I'll ask just one question. Thank you for being here, Chief. I much appreciate it. I wanted to ask about the 12,500 figure. I've been with the city for a long time. We've talked about 10,000. We've talked about 12,000 for a while when Mayor Reardon was around. When you say 12,500, I'm trying to get a sense of whether or not that is 12,500 officers on LAPD payroll or 12,500 officers doing police work. And what I mean by that question is, if the stats are close to true and we have 15 or 20% of folks who are not working because of workers' comp issues, if we have 600 civilian vacancies and a certain number of those are being filled by sworn officers, is 12,500 what we need, or is it 2,700 more officers than we currently have doing police work? Those are two different things, and I'm trying to get clear on that.
They are two different things, and we can get some efficiencies over what we do through the work comp system. That those numbers are accurate, but they don't they don't explain the whole story. The light duty officers, most of whom either are performing functions now that are policing functions or have been returned to full duty. We have a huge revolving door of temporary light duty. And if you hurt yourself. So anyway, but the point is that yes, we can get economies with what we have, but the reality is that until we expand the size of the Los Angeles Police Department, we cannot be as ready as we could be for unusual events. We will not be as ready as we could be for crime spikes. We are very good at getting the day-to-day done with the size department we have now. And we could get some economies and with a little funding for overtime and a little work on the work comp system and a better hiring stream so that we can go to our full level of staffing now, we could get incrementally better. But to do the big things, to do the things that this city will have to do in a crisis, to do the things that all of you expect on the community policing front, it's going to take more officers. Now, we can quibble on the number, whether it's 12.5 or 11.5, but I don't think that's as important as recognizing that this police department needs to be larger, and we need to have a plan to grow it. Now, those plans are always affected by budget. If we put together an aggressive plan, we may be able to increase by 300-400 officers a year if we improve our hiring process. Remember, I hired 500 officers last year, 500, and we broke even. So it takes a lot of hiring to move this needle.
I don't want to quibble over the numbers, although in the budget process, the difference between 11.5 and 12.5, that's huge.
Well, it is huge, but my point is that moving forward is the important piece. To go to 11.5, that's a 5-6 year plan.
To help you get to where you want as a member of this committee and as a budget committee, it would be helpful to me to know how many officers we need doing police work. Is that a number we can get?
12.5. I don't understand what you have to tell me what you're talking about when you say doing police work. They're all doing police work.
Not doing the civilian jobs, not being out on or light duty or workers' comp. I'm trying to figure out how many officers we need.
I think the league referred to that as street ready.
Street ready.
Well, we're always going to have officers out on workers' comp. That's a reality. There's always going to be a number. Now, whether that number is higher or lower, that depends a lot on the system, and then a lot on what faces our officers. The number is this is a number not only developed by me, but by consultants that we had put together our strategic plan, and this is also a number that my predecessor and I agreed on when he was here. You know, that would put us at parity with the Chicago Police Department, which has a third less geography and a third less population.
Can I add to what Mike just asked? So the industry standard is about 90% or maybe a little bit above, from what I understand, of being street ready of the full entire force. So to Mike's point, perhaps we're talking about at least 90% of 12,500 officers always being street ready, as opposed to the 85% we have now. Is that about right?
Well, you know, if again, you know, when we talk about 12, when you talk to me about 12.5, you're talking in 2020. We can't get there. I mean, even if we started now, so we'll have a better sense whether we can reform the work comp system between now and then. We'll have a better sense whether we can increase civilian hiring between now and then. Given the realities of today, given the realities of managing the Los Angeles Police Department, if you ask me for a number that I think would move the needle on patrol staffing, detective staffing, which is hugely important here, community policing fronts, 12.5 is the number. Now, could we get some efficiencies in these other systems? Well, maybe we can. But, you know, this is not the first time that I've had this conversation with folks in this committee. And we have moved the needle a little bit on this. Not these individuals, but in committees in the past. We've moved the needle a little bit, but we still need reform in hiring. We've got to be able to hire more cops. I can barely keep up with attrition now. So we got to be able to hire more cops. You know, we got to reform our work comp system. We got to be able to hire civilians. You know, so given the realities of those things, which haven't moved very much over my tenure as chief, you know, which is 7 years now, and my predecessor's tenure either, the number is I believe, 12.5. Now, if we get some economies on this thing, on work comp and on hiring and all that, and on civilian hiring, then maybe we could adjust that number downward. But my point is that we're nowhere near to making that call yet. You know, if we can gain the efficiencies, then maybe we can scale back to 12.5. But at our level of efficiency right now, I think the number is 12.5.
Thank you, Chief, for making yourself available this morning, and thank you for your presence at the LA Crime Forum, now in the Harbor area in the San Pedro.
Sure.
And Mr. Chairman, thanks for your presence as well at that Crime Forum. Nearly 1,000 people attended, and we're able to hear the pathway towards opening our jail. I mean, we are one of 5 jails that are shut down, and I appreciate the effort made by Chief Villegas, Chief Scott, in launching just last week the mobile jail van that's going to transport detainees, that's going to ultimately keep our officers out in the street down the Harbor area. You mentioned, I mean, hiring, civilian workforce, also sworn officers. This takes money, and
yes,
it's going to be up to this committee, this council, to prioritize these dollars. And at the end of the day, something has to give. We are looking at finding ways to, you know, trim our trees, pave our streets, fix our sidewalks, looking at our infrastructure needs, our housing needs. But let me be clear, public safety is a core function of local government. And if we fail in public safety, then we fail our residents, we fail the people who want to live, work, invest, and visit in this city. So know that moving forward, you have a champion here that will do everything we can to hire more cops. In fact, I have residents in my district who are screaming for more cops. You know, as a senior lead officer and really embraced the tenets of community policing, I often say that officers cannot be on every street corner 24/7. We cannot. Therein lies the importance of working with our community and all of our community-based organizations to have the eyes and ears to have that relationship with the police department. I feel that, you know, the relationship we have between the police department and the community compared to other parts of the country is strong. Prop 47 you mentioned at the LA Crime Forum in my district, as well as today I'm hearing, is an issue. I feel that voters were fooled with Prop 47. The state has not given those dollars that have been, that have been saved by the money that was saved for the reform system. Those dollars should be filtered down to the local level and help with the rehabilitation and the treatment and the supportive services. We're not seeing those monies today. And at the same time, we're seeing these crime spikes, property crime, violent crime, that are occurring throughout the city, throughout the state. What can you, give us some recommendations as far as, maybe this may be a recommendation, like to know what's the state doing to get these dollars down to local level to ensure that these treatment supportive services are being filtered down to the ground so that these individuals do not continue to commit the same crimes over and over and over.
Well, it's my understanding that the state has identified in and around $50 million in savings in the prison system just in the first year of Prop 47, and so I think that it's important that Los Angeles gets its fair share, and right now Los Angeles has not gotten their fair share, and neither has anybody else. This conversation is going on in different venues all across this state. There is no city, no major city in the state of California that did not see a crime increase last year. Well, there is one that didn't, and it may be counterintuitive. Oakland actually saw a reduction in crime last year. Only city to see that, but Oakland's crime rate per capita is 4 times what the city of Los Angeles is. So,
yeah.
It's a...
But as a board member of the League of Cities, California League of Cities, I'd like to partner with you and the police department and my colleagues to really put the pressure on the state to get those dollars down to the local level.
I think it's important, and I think that if we're going to realize the promise of 47, then the funding has to go to treatment. I think that the mistake is thinking that 47 was a cost-saving measure, and it shouldn't be. It should be a cost reallocation measure. If you want to change, if the people want to change incarceration for drug possession and other quote-unquote minor crimes, then there has to be a rehabilitation piece.
Otherwise, you have that revolving door.
Otherwise, we have what we've had this year, which is cops make an arrest, and because it's a misdemeanor and the person's been through the system so many times they have no warrants, they are immediately released, and the officer is left writing the reports in the station as the individual walks out the front door to go shoplift or go reoffend as a drug abuser again.
I know that you have to walk across the street, Chief. Lastly, property crime versus violent crime. Now, some parts of the city don't have that high spike of violent crime. I know the deployment of Metro. Share with us strategies as far as identifying property crime. The mission of the police department is to reduce the incidence and fear of crime. I know you have your command staff here, but other parts of the city, including my area, we've seen a spike in property crime as well. And is Metro specifically designed to address the violent crime in the city?
Metropolitan Division can address a variety of crime spikes, and we do use them on property crime, especially the high-end things that often turn into violent crime, such as residential burglary and things like that. So Metropolitan Division certainly can be used for those things, and certainly is. Violent crime, saving lives is really important, and so it is heavily weighted when we make decisions about deployment, but it's not the only factor. So I'll leave it to Mike, and to George to talk about that.
One more colleague that's got another question as well. And on 47, colleagues, I also just want to let you know that's one of my recommendations back is we're actually going to have just a dedicated meeting to that. I don't believe any of the numbers that have been shared with anybody, quite frankly. The legislative office, analyst office from Sacramento just came out with a report. You got to think about the $33.5 million increase in cost to us on parole cases and court workload. They anticipate it's actually about $135 million differential, bringing local prison savings to about $135 million. Between 15 and 16, I think the numbers are somewhere in between that 50 million or 135 million plus the added cost to all of us?
It's all soft.
It's all over the board.
All soft, murky math.
But the bottom line is, as the biggest agency and city in this state, it's incumbent of us to have a special meeting just on this issue. And it's not about whether you believe it's working or not. It's been implemented. What are we doing about it? What are the services coming back that were supposed to be promised? What are we doing to go to Sacramento to get some of those dollars back that were promised to make sure they get back not only the department but those critical services that were supposed to be part of this issue? So we've got to spend the quality time, and we'll invite the department and the league back for that conversation as well. I want to turn it over to Ms. Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to talk a little bit about the Metro Division. I want to know if it's working, how many officers, how are officers being deployed, and what the costs are associated to the Metro Division.
What was the last question, Councilman? The very last part? The last part?
Or what are the costs associated to the Metro Division?
Sure. Metropolitan Division has about 475 personnel deployed. 475. The cost for that is probably in and around $50 million a year. Right about there. They are deployed not only as part of our SWAT team, as part of our canine search teams, our dive teams, but also in 4 crime suppression platoons. The 4 crime suppression platoons are assigned to the 4 geographic bureaus of the city of Los Angeles and are used to address crime spikes in those bureaus. So you have a Valley platoon, have a West platoon, have a Central platoon, and a South platoon. And so they're used to respond to crime in those areas. They're tied geographically. This is a new piece to the expansion of Metro in order to not only build familiarity with crime in neighborhoods, but also to build bonds in those neighborhoods so that they're not seen as folks that come from the outside. They're primarily assigned in uniform to work problems in the neighborhoods. They also have a terrorism response piece. They are trained at a higher level than the normal Los Angeles police officer for terrorism response. They're also equipped at a better level. So they're one of our primary responses for that kind of thing.
My initial question was whether it was working or not.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it's working.
Do we
Yes.
have numbers to show where it's been more
Yeah,
effective?
we're going to actually. That's one of the recommendations. And we already talked to Chief Moore. We're going to. No, I know. We're going to bring. We want to make sure we get a report on that back as well.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because in my district, we see the number of officers that have been deployed to make up part of the Metro Division, and so it takes away from folks patrolling my neighborhood. So I'm really interested to find out whether this division is working and where is it making most of its impact. And then as a result of deploying 475 officers to make up the Metro Division, how is it impacting other neighborhoods and other services within the department? That's why I'm asking. So when
Well, remember, Metropolitan Division, they are not taken out and put in some other city. They came from your neighborhoods, and they still work in your neighborhoods. They work where they are most needed, just like the remainder of the Los Angeles Police Department. We are a very incident-driven organization. We're very crime-driven. We try to put our limited resources where crime occurs, and Metropolitan Division is a good tool by which we do that.
My understanding is they get deployed based on where there's the highest incidence of crime. So if for example, the Valley is almost 2 million people. So if the crime isn't as high in my district, it probably gets moved to the north. That still doesn't cover my area. So I understand how they're split up between 4 divisions, but the Valley is very big. And so the reason I'm asking again is because there is a number of vacancies in each and one of my police stations, and so I want to know what the impact of this Metro is having on the rest of my stations and how it impacts our crime in these neighborhoods.
Well, and all I can say to that for you is that every one of the 21 divisions saw a crime increase this last year, as did every major city in the state. These are difficult times in keeping crime down. So it's going to be very difficult to tie the crime increase to Metropolitan Division, given the fact that Long Beach does have a Metropolitan Division, Torrance does have a Metropolitan Division, Costa Mesa does have, on and on and on through the major
I
cities.
understand that. I just want to know if it's working, and if it is, then perhaps we should expand it and do something and move it around. I mean, I just want to know if it's working or not. That's my basic question, and how it's impacting the rest of the division. So.
Go ahead.
So, good morning, and just as a follow-up, I do CompStat each Wednesday, and so that's one of the primary questions that we ask. You know, to be clear, when we talked about 480 people, 475 people, there was an additional 200 people brought. There was a base level of nearly 275 that was in Metro before, and they had crime suppression platoons that seldom, if ever, worked the Valley. Rarely worked the Valley, I will say that, because they were, with those two platoons, focused on violence. With the expansion of Metro, which was some nearly 200 officers, it allowed us to put a full-time, dedicated platoon in Valley Bureau and in West Bureau.
Give me a second, Mike. Okay. I apologize to the committee. I have to go over to my police commission meeting. You know, but before I go, and Mike and George will represent me when I'm gone, and they can more than adequately deal with this and any other question. I want to thank the committee. You know, this is a really important discussion. I want to thank you for your support. Each and every one of you supports the Los Angeles Police Department and public safety, and I have seen that over and over again, not only in your enthusiasm for what we do in your neighborhoods, but your absolute attachment to the Los Angeles Police Department. And you know, I have worked closely with each and every one of you on issues in your respective council districts, and we'll continue to do that. I know that every district is unique, and every district has the things that matter to it, and we will continue to address those for you. So thank you all.
Thank you.
I'll give you back.
Thank you, Chief. The Chairman just stepped out, so on behalf of this committee, really appreciate your presence here, and we know that your presence really signifies the importance of this issue that's facing the city, so thank you.
Very good. All right. Thank you.
To follow up, the deployment in Valley Bureau, there's a Valley Bureau task force, crime suppression platoon, as there is in West Bureau, South Bureau, and Valley Bureau, or Central Bureau. The four deputy chiefs that are behind me in the geographic areas working for Chief Villegas decide each day where those two squads are and where they go generally within their bureau. But for a POTUS visit, but for some special event, or if there were to be a City of San Bernardino type of attack, then that would draw that pool of resources to a focused initiative. To give you an example, though, for Valley Bureau, to talk about proportionality as far as deployment, during the holiday season, in the immediate aftermath of the City of San Bernardino active shooter attack, in concert with our partnerships with our federal intelligence agency partners, there was a threat stream that suggested that it was unconfirmed, was unsubstantiated, that the threat of malls and major shopping centers was a high watermark that Al-Qaeda and others wanted to attack. During that 33-day deployment, it was disproportionately focused on where shopping centers and malls were, and that includes the Valley. So while the crime suppression platoons are four in each of the four corners, our commitment is to keep them generally in those one of the four corners. That, for Valley Bureau, having been out there before, is an improvement, because while we had the Violent Crime Task Force that became the Valley Crime Task Force under Chief Villegas and Chief Green, it had a total of about 50 personnel. And it did not work 7 days a week, and it did not work days and nights, and it was not a organized, trained, and well-equipped detail. That has changed today. The crime suppression detail that is working out of Metro for Valley Bureau is 76 deep. It works 7 days a week, and it works across the 20 hours, and it has the ability to respond off hours, and has not only the added training, but the equipment and standards that we believe will give the Valley better crime suppression. Now, Ms. Martinez, I will know and acknowledge to you that the Van Nuys corridor will see a higher level of concentration of crime suppression than perhaps the Reseda corridor or the Reseda corridor or the Topanga corridor. But the Valley is not of just one flavor or one particular concentration. There are concentrations of police resources, and within your district as well as across the Valley, Metro is meant to be strategic in finding within the 7 commands of that northern half of the city, where do we put them in regards to first being violent crime, but in the absence of violent crime, which violent crime does ebb and flow, we move them right into property crime, particularly auto theft related crimes, because that's where we're seeing the larger spike also in the valley. Does that, now as far as results go, we'll be happy to come back to the committee with formal settings as far as what, not just the crime, the arrest numbers, the productivity numbers, but also what we've seen happen in those neighborhoods in which Metropolitan is deployed. Now, Metropolitan is deployed, they start their watch with uniformed patrol officers at the area. They work closely with the crime analysis and with those commands, and we're comfortable that they're part of a solution. But make no mistake, they are not the solution to our crime fighting. It is just our most recent strategy, as the chief indicated, with finite resources and only so many ways in which you can use them to surge and gather to try to focus first on violent crime, but then also property crime. Anything you'd add to that?
I think one of the things that's important to talk about is that we're not abandoning property crime. It's not like all we're focused on violent crime. And we do our crime analysis, we do our staggered and our layered analysis so that we're looking at our anchor points of crime. We're also looking for chronic offenders, chronic locations that are repeat for crime, and that's where we're deploying all our resources. So, for example, the Metropolitan Division or any of the other units are deployed in one specific spot, one of the anchor points, we're deploying other units and other resources to other anchor points so that we don't have any part of the valley, in this case, that's naked and doesn't have resources deployed.
If I could, there is absolutely no argument, as the chief indicated, and hopefully, we did not get to strategies, but what the league has identified is a need for added patrols, a need for added deployment, a need for added civilians. This is an organization that has too many officers doing positions that civilians, a restoration of civilian positions could restore. The jail is the most obvious example, but there's many others. So what we're trying to do in the midst of this, though, in the interim of growing a department, is the best utilization of the resources we have, recognizing the finite number of funding that we have available to us. Added overtime monies would absolutely be welcomed, would absolutely be brought to help us with staffing. But what we face today is an effort to bring and deliver each to budget and finance and to the city a balanced budget that delivers the results that we promise as best possible, using as much innovation as possible. And with Metro, it's been about primarily violence, but also counterterrorism. But with property crime, I'd also remind the committee, PredPol, Predictive Policing, an initiative started in the Valley and Foothill Division to focus on the preventive measure of a police presence, is something that we've expanded and we'll focus on auto theft as we move through 16.
So when do you think you'll have the data to share with the committee on?
We can be back here in 4 weeks. This is we track. Would you like something sooner than that? We track.
I mean, we've been trying in our office.
Very regular.
Quite frankly, we've been trying in our office to get a sense of what that looks like. And for example, thanks to Deputy Chief Green, are you here? Mm-hmm. Wave to the audience. You know, we launched the Human Trafficking Task Force in the Valley about 4 months ago, and we can already see the difference it's made in the two tracks in the Valley, particularly around neighborhoods and community, and getting them a sense of reassurance that we're trying to deal with the issue, but also the types of arrests that the officers have made and put some of these pimps away. I mean, those are the kinds of information that I would need, and it would be helpful for me to better understand whether this is working or not, and how to explain that to my district.
We'll be happy to provide the data that what this particular strategy as the human trafficking task force, that deployment from resources of finite resources, the standard resources that we have, how those are producing the targeted results. Be happy to do that.
Thanks.
Yeah, Mr. O'Farrell?
Well, this is very frustrating. I didn't get to talk to the chief, but I'll do it out of committee like I usually do. Just the comments that I have are, first of all, I think we need the short-term emergency plan and the longer-term plan. And I think that my concerns with the strategic 2020 plan, I think we need to do some deep digging into the whole new division for the community relationship office. We know that our senior lead officers are the individuals across the city that actually build the relationships, and very few other officers have that opportunity to build the relationships at that level. My concern is I don't know that we need a whole new division for relationship building when we could just simply deploy more senior lead officers out in the communities they're already in. And I was going to share that with the chief, which I will do outside of committee. So I want to just kind of explore what that's going to look like in terms of resources. There's no doubt that we need a lot more relationship building out in the city with our communities. We've seen how the lack of those relationships can cause troubles and tension in our neighborhoods. But then I was going to get to the whole point of suppression and adequate deployment. We know that before I took office, I had a series of meetings with the chief, which resulted in 60 extra patrol officers in the Hollywood Entertainment District. In working with the chief and the new city attorney, we also created a stay-away, and Chief Grimala knows about this, that encompasses the entire Walk of Fame, not just 500 feet radius. Well, when the recent year-end statistics came out, the entertainment district had a very low single-digit increase in violent crime. And I think the suppression piece and the extra deployment, which is very strategic, speaks to that statistic. And so really the point I want to make about that is suppression works better, or at minimum should be on equal par with the relationship approach. You got to have suppression because the bad guys don't care how much relationship building you do in the community. They're going to strike when no one's looking. And then the last point I want to make, because it's after 10 o'clock, is that we want to see statistics specific, or I do, specific to the council districts. We know that there's basic squad car reporting, and that and that's kind of how you compile the statistics for the squad cars, and those overlap in several council districts. It would be very helpful if we could develop software or employ software that's already available to actually give specific council district boundary statistics. I've felt that we've always needed that, and I would love to include that in the evaluation.
My CompStat unit, I saw that email traffic this weekend, and we're committed to coming up with boundary files or something that will allow us to report crime across all 15 districts. If I can just piggyback on your specific strategy, that is the essence of what we do. The Community Safety Partnership is another such example. You talk about the Hollywood Entertainment District, we talk about LA Live, we talk about the Venice Beach details. We deploy people, when we deploy people who are dedicated, who are committed to ground, territorial imperative, we see tremendous results. As an example, as we've talked about crime and violent crime increasing across the city, last year in the community safety partnerships, 6 housing developments in some of the most violent areas of our city saw a 23% reduction in violent crime. Why? Because there were 50 officers that were committed. Now, to the league's position, which we absolutely 1,000% agree, those 50 people came out of what would otherwise be pushing black and whites and responding to radio calls and being available to do community policing. Across the course of this department, we have hundreds of officers that could be working in black and whites that are working on specific strategies, whether it is the Community Safety Partnership, it's the Hollywood Entertainment District, it's downtown Skid Row with Reset, it's the Hollywood, or it's the University Up Task Force, it is Venice Beach. There are all of these that are strategic on positions that are critical sites to our safety and our sense of safety. But at the end of the day, as the Chief indicated, we can cut around the corners, and we are committed to working on workers' comp reform. I stand here ready to absolutely willing and want to work with the League. We have in front of you, as you know, since August, a request for an interim request for 8 personnel analyst 2s and a sergeant, so that we can try to get a handle on where our return to work is to improve it. But it's a situation where in 2009 we had 3,200 civilians working. Today we have 2,699. So we're trying to restore civilians that are strategic to workers' comp, that are strategic to getting police officers in the street, that are strategic to improving public safety. And we welcome this conversation that's ongoing, the presentation today. I stand by my quotes earlier that were nicely showcased there, that minimum staffing in the sense of a basic level of patrol, absolute requirement. However, we have to do that in a manner where we use it with the resources we have. And today, we're trying to give you the best presentation of how we see that formula that's going to continue to evolve in the months and years ahead. The benefit for this committee and for the City Council is that the Mayor's office, who we're working alongside, is very much aware of these strategies, very much supportive of expanding and restoration of civilian hiring, of supporting a full achievement of 10,000 sworn on our growth phase, because that, at the end, as we achieve that in an interim and long-term basis, we'll see better public safety.
And let me just lastly say, I agree. I think we need pragmatism here, and we need to deal with the reality that we have as far as resources. But the other part of that equation is we need to think bigger than we've ever thought before. We absolutely have to.
And that
because
goes,
even I would argue that even in the years before the recession, when crime was just really taking a nosedive and now it's heading back up, I don't think we should ever settle for being the most out of balance city in the United States in terms of our per capita officers in relation to the population. I think the longer term, we've got to do the short term, and we've got to get up to over 90% of street-ready officers, period. We've just got to do it. And then the longer term is we've got to have more police officers, into the thousands, not the hundreds. But that's a long-term strategy, but we really have to think big and plan way ahead to actually make it happen. Otherwise, we're just doing things for show and shifting things around so they'll look good, and that's what concerns me.
we are committed. We have a strategic plan. It bears out what our ask to this committee and to the full council and the mayor is for funding. If additional funds were available, for instance, to augment patrol staffing so that we could deepen the number of officers that are working across the clock 24/7, beyond our $85 million that we spend today on homicide investigations, on extended watch for those very same patrol officers to complete reports, for court, for tactical events. If added monies were available, we would welcome them in a moment. But we're also mindful, and this is where we should think large term. Councilman Bonin asked, why 12,500? Well, because 12,500 would not even get us close to Chicago. Mm-hmm. Chicago per capita would cost us 16,400 police officers. Yeah. So when you're talking long, big sky thinking, that was what Chief Beck and before him Chief Bratton have said with 12,500, because they know that's the journey to begin to get us on par with major cities. However, pragmatically, this is a city that's gone through this worst financial crisis, and in the face of it has maintained sworn staffing at a level that we believe provides the best opportunity for public safety. But it's been at a tremendous cost of our civilians. And those civilians have loss of civilians has resulted in closed jails, closed property rooms. Just those two aspects alone have a tremendous impact on an officer's productivity and an officer's availability for the field. In this coming budget year, you see proposals for us to begin to resolve that. And we hope that we'll find your support.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank PPL for their presentation as well. I didn't get a chance when you came up to thank you. Community policing reset, I think, is important. I think I'm actually concerned we need more than CPR. I think we may need some heart surgery, to be honest. I'm very concerned about the level of community policing in the city and the minimum staffing levels. Just a quick question. Mm-hmm. We talked a lot about Metro and the resources that have gone into Metro. I'm curious about where those resources came from.
Sure. So as a walk down memory lane, 50 of the 200 were a restoration of officers back into Metro that we took out in 2010 when we lost overtime funding. When overtime funding went away, the organization pulled from Metropolitan Division and other specialized details upwards of 200 people to put back into the geographic areas. And that came right out of the crime suppression platoon. So that 50 of the first 200, the first 50 of the 200 was a restoration of that. That occurred last April. Then the remaining 150 took from police officer authorities that existed in operations. So that is a realignment, if you will, or realignment of resources that otherwise would have been out in the area.
When you do the additional report that you said you'd have in 4 weeks, could you please give a detailed breakdown of where they came from in terms of geographic area and specialized unit and stuff like that?
Absolutely. I'll tell you that 33% came out of patrol.
Again, if you could include that in the report.
We'll provide that for you.
Great. I mean, because I'm concerned that they came out of patrol, frankly, because I think, like many of my colleagues, we're getting complaints that the number of patrol officers have diminished. So I want to ask a couple questions about the minimum staffing levels for patrol. In Councilmember Smith's motion in 2007, he called for 10 basic cars for, I guess it was each division. Has that ever happened, and is that the case now?
So presently, the organization has 168 basic cars. It's a configuration that's existed for 20, 30 years. A basic car is a delivery system. It's a black and white, 2 officers that are assigned to territorial boundaries. They have an accompanying senior lead that is charged with leading that and providing peer leadership and coordinating problem solving and community outreach efforts, as well as handling basic routine and emergency calls for service. Those 168 basic cars are then broken down throughout the city into 21 geographic areas. So today, what that formula is not just for response units. That is a foundational element of our community policing problem-solving model of how we deliver police services. Because it's not just that those officers are supposed to be out there just to chase radio calls or respond to 911, but they're also there to work with the community, collaborate with the community, and do problem-solving efforts.
Let me just real quick just make an announcement. This committee meeting is going a little over time schedule. It will continue as long as it needs to. Council has already been adjourned for lack of a quorum because of this committee meeting. This is absolutely the most important conversation right now in the city of Los Angeles that we could be having. So I want to get through this, no matter how long it takes, and have ample time, even though this will not be the first or last time we're having this conversation. We're going to continue it, but this meeting will now have the opportunity to continue this meeting since there will not be council, please.
Thank you. So we never got to 10 basic cars per patrol area, per division.
No, that would have raised the number of basic cars to 210 from 168.
Do we have a basic, a minimum level of basic car per geographic area now?
Yes. So what happens today is a patrol plan, which is the modeling of deployment across for 911 response as well as general deployment in an area for patrol resources. A model that was adopted by this and formally adopted by this council in 1988, following much discussion about where do you put police officers in this city and which portions of the city deserve more officers than others, and how do you determine that? It's kind of the determination of equity. And what that patrol plan, which the Department or the Office of Operations uses each month, it looks at what is the actual workload. And basic cars are a portion of it, but it actually identifies the number of response units that are needed to do two things. One, it projects workload. Police work is not flatline. It ebbs and flows. And so it projects the number of units that are needed to respond to an emergency call for service on average in 7 minutes. And then it also will tell you how many additional units would be needed to have a 40% problem-solving time.
So you could tell me in any given month how many basic cars there are in Pacific versus how many in another division?
How many response units, how many basic cars or A cars or X cars or 2 officer units that we put and are needed to be put into patrol so as to...
And you could break that down by basic car and A car and everything else.
We can break it down by area, generally reliant on the basic cars, but what you have is that there's workload at times that exceed the number of basic cars substantially, meaning that an area may have 7 basic cars, but the workload says you need 12 units if you're going to do this for this 4-hour period, if you're going to reach these service thresholds. So it's not... but that's the essence of it. It's a little more complicated than just an A car. You may have an A car and 2 or 3 X cars in order to service the workload just in that boundary.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is I'd like to be able to know month to month what your ideal deployment would be for West LA and for Pacific and what it actually was.
Okay.
Is that something that this body can get?
I believe so. One of the concerns we have, first of all, we track that number. We have a deployment unit within Chief Villegas' Office of Operations that understands how many, what patrol plan identifies as a target and what our actual deployment is. That's one of the major tasks that they have, is balancing that across the city. So providing that to you, the concern I would have explicitly is telling you how many officers are working tonight in the city of Los Angeles, particularly West LA. Now, for a confidential matter, and for as a councilman, you have the right to know that. What I don't want to have happen is for the criminal element to know at what point in time do we have 4 units working this division, or 7 units working this division. What time do I have 12 units working?
Yeah, well, I was asking for after the fact. I mean,
And what we could do is we can schedule meetings. Bugle Mall and myself can meet with you.
But if it's done after the fact, couldn't it just come? Why would it make a difference if it was not beforehand, but whether it was a week or 2 or 3 after?
My first impression is to provide it to you. The second impression is it begins, is there a sinister use by a criminal element? It's not a matter, I mean, we have what we have. There's nobody's getting bonus or getting something.
Let me tell you one of the reasons you want to do it. Mm-hmm. I understand your concern. You don't want folks to know, oh my God, there's hardly a cop car in Brentwood.
Or there's 1 unit in Brentwood, and then to try to understand why there's 1 unit in Brentwood and not 3.
But if you guys are going to come here, and with all due respect, and every time we ask a question about deployment and basic staffing levels, we need more money. We also need more firefighters, and we also need more librarians and more rec assistants and more people doing street sweeping and street maintenance. If that's the answer every time, you damn sure want the public to know what your needs are, so they're part of the group of people who are saying, you know what, as much as we want our sidewalks fixed, we want more cops even more. That has to be part of the discussion.
Fair point. Absolutely.
So you mentioned the patrol plan, and you said it came about in the 80s. That also resulted in the 70-40 mandate,
yes.
Right? You sort of referenced the 7-minute response time, 40% proactive policing.
Yes.
Is that mandate still in effect?
No, is it in effect mandate? It is a stated goals of the organization relative to delivery of its basic patrol system.
So it's a goal, but we don't come close.
No. Well, what we have today is we have a 5.8-minute response time to emergency calls for service for 2015, which is an improvement from 6.2 that occurred in 2014. We track those measures and those performance measures very, very closely with the idea that a 7-minute response time overall in the city is our goal.
So
emergency calls.
On the 7 side of the 740, we're doing better.
Yeah.
On the 40 side, what do you think we're doing?
40 side is more difficult to quantify because we have what makes up 40% can be people moving around and just driving about, and it can be investigative stops, and I have a harder time quantifying that, frankly. But it we can certainly look and see where we're at on the 40%. What we generally look to is what is our ability of our ACARs, our basic response units, to handle the urgent, routine, and emergency calls, and then what's their productivity in regards to traffic stops, investigative stops for narcotic suspects, citizen flag downs. Are they just chasing a radio, which many officers feel that they are, or do they have some discretionary time? The challenge for us is when that discretionary time occurs.
Right. I mean, my concern is, thank you. My concern is I know we don't want officers just chasing the radio, but someone's got to chase the radio. If somebody's not chasing the radio, someone's not getting their call answered. Someone's, got a hot prowl that is going to take longer, or,
Maslow's theory that it is the first priority of that basic car.
Right. So something I've asked for a couple years since joining the council is a metric that has so far eluded me. I was trying to ask the chief earlier how many street-ready officers we need versus how many we have. That to me is the only metric I'm concerned about. I don't care how many cops we have on the payroll. My only metric I care about is how many we have that are street ready. And if we can get there through efficiency or get there through hiring, I don't care. I just want to get to that number. Part and parcel of that is trying to get an understanding of, for me, as the guy who hears when folks can't get an answer when they call 877 Ask LAPD or they don't see enough cars patrolling their neighborhoods.
Yes.
Part of that is figuring out how many officers and how many hours are on patrol. Do you know, as a result of your patrol plan, as a result of CompStat, at the end of a week or the end of a month, how many hours were spent by officers on patrol in West LA?
As far as, yes, as far as shift work, when you describe patrol, is that unassigned to anything, or is that just working patrol in West LA?
Either way.
Yes. The answer is we can do both of those things. We have the granularity of this. It all depends on, again, getting a good definition of what the question is, so that we can make sure that we're answering the question that we think we are. At the end of the day, the operations knows every 28 days what patrol plan recommends for a 7-minute 40% available. And I will tell you that we do not staff geographically in 21 areas continually 100% of that. And the reason for that is we would not have many of the specialized focused energies that I spoke about earlier if we did, because what those resources come from is patrol resources. So
well, that's exactly what I'm getting at, is what I'd like to be able to see or know is from month to month or from year to year, are we spending fewer hours and deploying fewer people for patrol duty than we did in the prior period? And that's a vitally important metric, because every specialized unit has value. We certainly need detectives. We certainly need the DART teams. We certainly need the Metro. But for us to get a sense of whether or not we're doing, if the trade-offs are enough, since it all comes from patrol, we need to know what's left of patrol.
we can provide certainly what's left of patrol, and what is left of patrol, just so there's certainty. There is sufficient resources, and we measure that not only by officer sentiment, but by also what our productivity is, what our problem-solving capabilities are, and what the metrics are, pure metrics in the sense of response calls, and cross in, cross out. There's a host, there's just under 1.3 million radio calls for service in the state of Los Angeles every year. That's what patrol and gang units and metro units and other uniform resources are out responding to. As they're doing that, patrol is the basic delivery system to charge with that primary function. But we have secondary groups as well, secondary enforcement groups, and that the model actually provides for this. And what the department has done, for instance, in the last 5 years, is formalized that secondary enforcement group so that these added deployments in like Hollywood, dedicated deployment within boundaries, 7 days a week, 20 hours a day, is actually not being taken from patrol, from Captain Zarconi, but he's given that allocation. And then the remaining officers were saying, please, those are your patrol units. Now what captains will do, because I was one once, is I'll take my 350 remaining officers, and then I'll say I could really use a human trafficking task force, because this is an important endeavor that I work on this neighborhood, that I improve public safety in my entire command by reallocating 5 or 6 officers for this task force. And we have those initiatives occur throughout the city. What we're charged with at a macro level is making sure that the commands understand the basic car delivery system, what it has to do with while they're trying to balance what these specialized supposed to. At the end of the day, Councilman, no, we'll be happy to provide you any of these metrics to show you what we have and where it's going. Because
so we would be able then, as council members, to look and see month to month, do we have fewer patrol officers and hours being patrolled in a given division than we did the month before, or more?
Yes, I would think so.
All right. So I wasn't going to get into this, but you opened me up to it. You mentioned the constant staffing for the Hollywood Entertainment Division.
Well, it's not constant staffing; it's dedicated staffing.
Dedicated staffing.
I may have misspoke.
I'd like, you can answer this offline, but I'd like to know what the criteria was to get that, because I have been not successful in getting the same for Venice Beach, despite trying for
I
quite
can
some
tell you that, Mike. I can tell you what the criteria was. You want me to tell you now?
No, I want to hear from them because
Well,
I've got very similar circumstances.
Well, it was a substantial surge in violence and in public disorder and undermining the confidence of the Hollywood community in the revitalization of Hollywood. And probably the broader strokes, I believe it started in 2008 or 2009. And to this day, the impact of those added deployments, which we watch very closely so that it doesn't become apathetic and just like it's just a standard.
So
we pay very close attention to understand.
I'd argue that my community
it's
meets
doing.
those standards. When does my unit start?
Well, I would argue with you, but I won't, that that every community in Los Angeles, I think the essence of today's presentation is that every community in Los Angeles deserves more police officers and needs, whether it be San Pedro or Chatsworth or Tujunga. There's not a community in Los Angeles that feels like it's over-policed or that it has more than it needs. What we're doing strategically, including added deployments in Venice Beach, is trying to address hotspots. We're trying to address emerging issues by added deployments and added strategies to try to combat and partner and collaborate with the community to turn things around. But this is not a bowl of resources where we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul and sacrificing some deployments over others. But we're trying to do so in a manner that's fair, that's consistent, and that's transparent. So giving you that information is, I'm not, certainly we welcome the opportunity to talk with you.
That's a conversation to continue.
Can I just add this really quick?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So the basic car plan, I'm sure only a couple people really understand it. And I looked over it, and for the life of me, I'm trying to figure it out. But our officers spoke. So the basic car plan should not just respond to 911 calls. I was a senior lead officer in Southeast Division. We need police officers also to be free to handle community policing. If these officers are assigned to, for example, Southeast Division, they need to know the community because the community trusts them. They give them crime information. They help with solving crime. So if the goal is 7 minutes and there's 40% free time, the officers stated that they have no time, 89%, and these are in patrol. 89% stated that they don't have the ability to conduct community policing because they're going to call to call to call.
Or even obs work.
Absolutely.
That's the thing. If you look at the observation work that is needed to prevent crime in the first place, and that's one of my concerns. I was talking to the chairman here. The non-emergency calls, we're hearing from constituents, residents, that when they call the non-emergency line, it's taken them hours to respond. And for us, quality of life crimes in my district are just as important as the felonies that occur in my district as well.
So let me echo Director's remarks about a basic car's obligations. We do not believe in a split force deployment. In policing, American policing, this has been long settled. Split force is you have response units, all they handle is calls for service, and you have problem-solving units. And the problem-solving units are in days go by, you call them the trailer police because they sat out in the trailer and they've cooked up all the problem-solving efforts in an area. And we, as an organization, we want the basic car, we want the A car to be able to handle its problems and handle its calls and also have a partnership and collaboration and do problem-solving initiatives. The other aspect of this that we agree with you is we look at routine calls for the very point of the model of the patrol plan talks about emergency calls for service. We look at routine and urgent calls for service response times regularly amongst commands and work with them to ensure their deployment practices are such that they meet they meet them. 38 minutes is the average today. I will tell you that there's some, for a routine call across the city of Los Angeles, there are some commands that's higher. There are some commands that have 44 or 45. There was a ComStat inspection about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago with West Bureau, specifically Hollywood, because their response time for routine calls was going up. It was going up.
Can you just for the sake of this committee and those listening in, define a non-emergency routine call, talk a little bit about perhaps what those averages are, whether it's coded 2 or a non-coded call, how many are dropped off, or if you can,
Sure.
and maybe that's a discussion, we can have to look into.
So the organization, thank you, Councilman, for reminding me. My apologies.
Bringing it back home. Yeah.
So there's the organization receives just under 5 million calls to 911 and non-emergency calls each year. From that, we will dispatch just under 1.3 million of a radio call. The radio call will be one of 3 classifications: a routine matter, still needing of police service, an urgent call, commonly known as a code 2, or an emergency call for service, which is a code 3 call. Last year in Los Angeles, call load increased. The number of calls to communications increased 4%. That makeup of that increase, however, was heavily weighted to emergency calls and urgent calls, which frankly mirrors what we're seeing as far as an increase in serious crime. As we dispatch those calls, they go out to a unit. If there's not a unit available to pick up that call will sit in a queue. It waits and it's broadcasting. What we measure as a department is the time the operator picks up the phone until a unit is on scene, commonly known as code 6. In Los Angeles, a routine call is just over 38 minutes, 38.6. A urgent call is 18.6, and a emergency call for last year was 5.8 minutes on average. Now, some of
Lights
those
and
calls,
siren.
some of those calls,
Emergency call, lights and siren.
and I'll define what those 3 are. Some of those calls we got there sooner. Some of those calls we got there later. But it is an average mean, as Mr. Alicon and I like to talk about. What is the average? It is an average mean. What an emergency call for service is that your life is in peril. There is a person inside your home burglarizing your home and you're present. There is someone's life is at risk of serious bodily injury. So a robbery would be, for instance, an emergency call. An urgent call would be a suspicion that a crime is about to occur. A person is about to burglarize a home, or a person is actually seen going over a wall. We don't think there's someone there, but we think someone is going to be there. Or there's someone's going to break in a house or steal a car. A routine call is, I suffered a burglary. My house, I came home and my house is broken into. There's no one here, but I need a police to take a report. That would be an urgent call. A routine call. A party down the street it's getting late, and I need a unit to come out here and talk with them and have them turn the noise down. That would be a routine call, a legitimate need for police service, but a more of a routine nature. Someone is not in immediate peril.
They're still victims. They're still victims. Someone broke into my house and not there yet. Someone just stole my purse, they're not there yet. They're still victims. And I know for a fact that a lot of these calls go to the storm log, and sometimes they don't get to them to the next day. So the residents of Los Angeles have to have better service, which means we need more police officers. I'm a victim whether I was shot at or whether I was robbed, and the suspect's no longer there. I'm still a victim. So that resident is still a victim of crime. So a lot of times the storm calls, which hasn't been discussed, those calls are on the storm log sitting in the watch commander's office hoping a unit responds to them.
And if I might, I by no means...
Actually, we're not going to go through a debate. This is
Well, I'm not
definitely
going to debate.
But we're not going to. Let's do this. Let's stick it to the committees, asking the question, the committee members, if we could, and appreciate that, Mitch.
That's true.
Forgive me for not being able to get off of this point, but it deserves mention again, because I want to get to 12,500 officers, maybe more, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if the industry standard is 90% of officers being street ready, or if that's a laudable goal, or if that's realistic in on balance, and we get to 12,500 officers, that means that if we're at 90% street ready, we have 11,250 officers available at any given time. Now, if it's 84% street ready, which is what we have now, basically, roughly, that would mean that only 10,500 officers would be available. If the percentage of street ready holds that we currently have, and you could probably give or take dollars, a few numbers there, and a half a percentage point or two, but that's fairly accurate. So that just, I think, drives home the point of getting more civilians hired for non-police work, and then dealing with this workers' comp and officers being laid up for up to a year while they're drawing down their disability. But I think that's a room for improvement. And I'm not beating anyone on the head over it. I'm just saying statistics don't lie, numbers don't lie. We want to have this short-term emergency staffing plan that we can address immediate needs while striving toward long-term goals of hiring more officers in significant numbers.
We are in absolute agreement. The civilian hiring, restoring 585 civilians that we now do not have working will result in opening up property rooms, opening up of the 5 jails, will involve removing officers from behind the desk, working detective duty, answering phones, doing timekeeping, working crime analysis. We 1,000% agree that restoration of civilian hiring, expanding that, amplifying that on a short-term basis would improve our field units immediately. Recruitment, as the chief indicated, 510 police officers were hired in 2015. That is a high water line. You have to go back to 2008 when it was over 800. But we lost as many officers as we hired. And so today we have 183 people sitting in an academy. We need to hire this fiscal year probably 600 to build and get up to 10,000, which is our goal.
Just to stay attrition.
No, to stay at attrition and gain that 100. We're approximately short.
You've been budgeted those numbers in the past and can't seem to, for whatever reason, hire them because they're stuck in personnel. Have those problems been worked out? Now, this isn't that for that conversation, but is that one of the big issues?
It's it's an ongoing issue with the mayor's office and personnel department.
I've suggested directly to the last 2 previous mayors and this police chief that this council is ready, willing, and able to take out backgrounds out of the personnel department because there seems to be a backlog, and we're told this in private conversations continuously for years, and saying we're ready to make that decision, just give us the green light, and the department doesn't want it back. So I think we have to figure out if we're going to make that move or not, or if they've actually solved the problem in moving and hiring and processing backgrounds fast enough, or we should just pull the plug and say it's not working, the problems are taking too long to fix, and move it back to the department. I think not for this conversation now, but if you can go back to the chief, talk to personnel, and figure out if we should schedule that for this committee as well to find out, or at least personnel, if those problems aren't fixed, we've got to fix them. Because it makes no sense if we give you all the money and the budget, and then you just can't hire enough officers.
In fairness to my colleagues at Personnel Department and Ms. Macy, as well as the mayor's leadership and his team, this has been an ongoing effort for 2 years that I'm aware of, and we are seeing progress. We are seeing improvements. The numbers I'm giving you, there in 2014, we had 283 people that were hired. So you are seeing improvements. There are process improvements that we're engaged in today and moving forward. We're going to continue to be committed, and we are a partner in this. As to who does backgrounds or not, it's the department's. Our position is that we're going to work and stay with the current process and try to wean out time. It takes too long to become a police officer in this department. Mm-hmm. In 2016. The current batch of 183 academy recruits that we have took 8 to 10 months to enter the academy successfully. I believe, and I have a number of other individuals, and I know the personnel department is committed to shortening that time from applicant to recruit. And I believe if we do that we can compete more favorably in a marketplace that is hiring police officers. Law enforcement is a resurging industry where 3 or 4 years ago, no one else was hiring. LAPD was, and we had ready applicant pools. Today, every agency, every major agency, and many minors are stealing from one another. And in fact, they're trying to pull ours. our people to those agencies. So we have to be competitive not only in wages and benefits and job conditions, but we also have to, but I think one of the major ways.
So, okay, I got it. It's still broken, it's not fixed, but you're maybe making progress.
Do we offer lateral incentives?
I'm sorry?
Do we offer lateral incentives? I remember.
We're not offering incentives at this point. That was a strategy that was.
It's something we need to look at.
The department welcomes that recruitment bonuses, lateral incentives. Those are all matters that are we think are open for discussion. Budget, funding allowing.
So what can we expect, Chief, in this current, your asks, the department's asks moving forward this next fiscal year as we prepare the budget? And specifically, I'm more interested in hearing how soon can we get our 5 jails open, and what number, 36 months, as the Chief indicated, the department indicated, over the course of the next 3 years to open the 5 jails. We feel that's too long.
Right.
Can we anticipate cutting that time just a little
With that,
shorter?
I think let's put those towards the recommendations of this committee, and I've got a number of them that I'll add to that as well.
So when you get to the recommendations, I would like to just ask for some things, and I could talk about it now or just.
Let's go ahead and talk about it.
I didn't get back to this, and I don't see the reason to do deep digging right now when we can see it in a written report, and that is in relation to the parole compliance unit. Just the numbers, the numbers of how many individuals found to be in violation of their parole. What were the top violations? Were they drug-related? Were they just someone on parole for a violent offense or on the run for something? What was the area of focus? And how does it all relate to AB 109 and Prop 47? I think a written report.
We have all that information.
You have it
We'd
already.
be happy to. Absolutely.
Terrific. I think that would be very, very helpful because it was talked about here. We beat a dead horse over it. I'm in agreement with that. I think Prop 47 is a mini disaster, and I've felt that for a long time. I see it when I'm out in my district and in the encampments that I go to. So I think some real hard data from what that tells us will help us in relation to getting the funding that we deserve, lobbying our counterparts in the state legislature for mitigating the unintended consequences of Prop 47. So I would like to suggest that, along with the whole, what does it look like, Chief Moore, we talked about this, in terms of district-specific, district-boundary crime stats.
Right. I'm going to go through that.
Thank you.
Question for Chief Villegas, if I may, Mr. Chairman. The special events, South Bureau gets slammed with a number of special events, with, of course, events at the USC, Coliseum, and others. I'm often told from my former partners at Harbor that they get, officers get pushed out of deployment to fulfill those needs. Can you share with us, some of those challenges at, for example, USC football games? Does the USC pay us for those officers? Are they all on duty, overtime base?
Well, yes and no. It depends on the actual event that's occurring. So let's talk about the Grammys, for example, yesterday. We had over 425 officers that were deployed to that event on ancillary and or specific assignment to that. We pull for that type of a deployment from throughout the city because there is no one area or one division that can afford all of their personnel to be deployed to that. So they come from Devonshire, Topanga, Harbor, Van Nuys, et cetera, so that they can, fulfill some of the obligations for example, yesterday's deployment, as well as
Marathon. We had the marathon as well.
Again, another deployment that caused citywide personnel to be moved and or loaned for a day or for a shift.
The city's dime, or is it the organizer's dime?
Again, it depends. Each individual special event is different, and it depends if it's boss permitted, if it's not boss permitted. There's a whole host of different factors and variables that go into play at each event.
Bureau of Street Services is a special event ordinance that this council approved and is actually a governing protocols and process for evaluating special events for profit, for community-based nonprofit grassroots effort that may be on a corridor that needs police services because the streets are shut down and you have a public gathering, versus USC having a football game. Generally, to answer your question directly, internally, those resources are on an overtime basis that are provided for by USC. The outside surrounding neighborhoods will be, which require additional policing because of the fans and sometimes criminal element that's drawn to those neighborhoods in response to those events, are generally on a department's dime, or the department takes from its existing resources. There is a cost recovery that comes through the CAO's office, working with Public Works. We identify as a department how many people we put, how many resources we assign on this. What happens is the cost recovery is then a matter that works through Public Works to work with the organizer, for instance, the Academy Awards, the Oscars, BET, and they provide a portion of that of those costs.
I think that should all be done on an overtime basis. We're getting killed down there because we're just losing cars, and that's and we're hearing it from the men and women on the streets because it then ultimately becomes a calls for service issue, an officer safety issue.
The department I know that this can sometimes sound callous, but I don't mean to use the word the department in a phrase to mean some isolation. But as an organization, we plan special events from our existing resources, and we're aggressive in any cost recovery that the city will provide, that the city can provide by working with organizers, such as the LA Marathon. But at the same time, and have those conversations more broader than just the department, we are the second largest city in the country, and we are a world-class city, and we have a world-class marathon, and we need, as the first order of business, the department to smartly deploy for the safety of those participants and those that attend. As to cost recovery, this body, as a portion of the city council and city government, really is charged with determining what is that cost recovery look like. But as an organization, what we do is when we do not have sufficient resources so that harbor is underwater because of a special event, is that we will identify and police that on an overtime basis. So there is a mechanism in play.
At times we may be dropping calls because of the shift of resources to special events, and we're doing a disservice to those who need the police services.
And on Sunday, there was a significant event in 77th area relative to an in-custody death that resulted in an investigative response, a categorical investigation that further drafted us and pulled resources away from the field. What we do in those instances is we do have trigger points, though. We do have circuit breakers, watch commanders, area commands, bureau commanders that are sitting behind me that are working to model how do we use our existing resources smartly and when do we call in additional resources so that we can maintain basic levels of services. But it is a living organism, and this is a living and dynamic organization. What we're hearing from officers through this survey is a dissatisfaction that there's not enough of them. We will not argue with that. Given what resources we have, we believe this is the best application to accomplish all of the demands that are placed on the organization.
I'm stumped. As a senior lead officer, 7 years, I missed the days of seeing a bike unit fully deployed. I missed the days of seeing a footbeat walking up and down 6th to 7th Street. I missed the days of seeing a full deployed special problems unit. We're just not seeing that.
Same day?
No, they're not. Just throughout.
Yeah.
As far as the USC, though, the officers have been also complaining because they'll take resources, for example, 200 to go to a USC game within South Bureau, which leaves, and not just within South Bureau because they draw from other areas, but I agree, those positions need to be on an overtime basis because they'll take from the current deployment, which leaves 4 cars or 3 cars. So I agree with the overtime.
Sometimes 2 cars.
All right.
Yeah, sometimes 2.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, and on that note, it's also special events aren't something new to the city of Los Angeles. They're not something new that have recently emerged where we're deploying these types of resources. So it's a systematic view of, while that continues or it's always been done that way, there are other elements that perhaps aren't working. I want to wrap this up in a couple different ways. One, I noticed we've had some new guests walk in as well, and people holding up speaker cards. We've actually already had public comment when we started off, and that's why it was open and closed at the beginning of this meeting, which I stated. With that, I think it's important to reflect on a couple things. We're not here to finger point at the department or the league or the men and women of this phenomenal department. In fact, what I think is, and I'm proud to wear that badge as well, the best department by far that does more with less than any other department, period. And what we're looking at is the system clearly, in looking at the numbers and the statistics, there's pieces that are broken, whether it's deployment issues, whether it's work comp issues, whether it's how many are street ready issues. Statistics are mildly interesting from behind a desk. And I think it was said earlier, it couldn't be further from the truth. Behind every one of the numbers, behind every one of the statistics, is a victim. It's a loved one. It's a family. Somebody that's been dramatically affected or may even be dramatically affected their entire life because of it. That's what's important. It's not one of the most important things we do in government. It's the most important thing we do, period. It's protecting the residents. Public safety, absolutely, without question, is the most important thing we do. There are so many moving pieces and variables, and I open it up with this. Things that are within and things that are without our control. We've got to focus on both. Things we can and things we can't control. And we've got to constantly dialogue and look at moving all those pieces. And it's incumbent upon us as elected officials, because it's our responsibility, to ask these questions. And we do so when crime is also being reduced. It's not just about standing up with the department and trying to take credit because crime is down. We also figure out, while crime is down, how do we maintain that? We've also pumped more money into making sure we keep those numbers down during good times, whether it's intervention and prevention programs. We've incredibly expanded GRID and other programs, Jeopardy, PALS programs, other things, because we see the numbers are working, and so we put more resources into that. Those resources remain, but the system isn't working because the numbers are going up. I think everybody shares responsibility in that. I also want to thank the league in this, because I know they've stepped up to say they too share responsibility. They're not looking to place blame or point fingers and saying the system's broken because of the department or elected officials or budgetary issues. They're saying, let's step up and look at some of the issues that we can control and some of the solutions. And there's been various ones presented here today that we've talked about for quite some time. And so what I'd like to do, colleagues, is go through various recommendations for report backs. And these report backs are going to be actual action items. We're going to continue to move these through the system, whether it is referring those recommendations to the various policy committees of this body, moving them on to directly to the mayor's office and or the police commission and back to council, or implementing the changes on the spot, because there are some things that require no council action whatsoever, but things that just need to be done. Because conversation has already taken, quite frankly, too long, and I don't mean today, I mean over years, where these issues have been brought up and clearly not focused on enough. So the first thing we're going to look at is a comprehensive report back, and we'll do a special committee on AB 109 and Prop 47. We're going to look at not the fact that we agree or disagree with those initiatives, not at the fact that they're not working and we have more crime because of it. They have been passed by the voters, whether they've been duped, I think was a word used earlier, or fooled, or otherwise. They have been passed. We've inherited these now, and we have to deal with them. We also have a chief legislative analyst report by the Office of the Legislative Analyst in Sacramento that we need a full interpretation of by our CAO in terms of the dollars and resources that have either been saved or we have to go after, because those are critical resources to look at the programs that need to be implemented because of it and that were promised with it. So we'll do a day on AB 109 and 47, and we'll ask for specific and call back specific experts outside of the city to weigh in on those as well. We want an immediate report from both the department and the Police Protective League, as well as the controller. And we don't need to wait till the controller audit's done, hopefully, for a civilian restoration plan. We'd like to see, at a minimum in next year's budget, 200 positions filled during the budget year, what it would cost, how many sworn it would return to patrol. So we'd like to look at an immediate emergency civilian restoration hiring plan for a minimum of 200 positions in the department to look at where those need to go. We'd like recommendations from the league on revamping workers' comp systems to include a report from the CAO and the CLA and personnel, to include alternative dispute resolution programs, illness and injury prevention plans, and workers' comp change suggestions. We need to know what is within our control of our contract. I'd like to comp stat workers' comp to the agency that's supposed to be providing it to us. That's contracted out. How are they doing? Let's hold them accountable. What's within our control and not within that contract? And are they meeting the demands of that contract? And if not, and they're falling short, we need to know why. Hold them accountable. They have to be brought here as part of the solution and figure out what we can do. Are ADRs part of that contract or not? We need to look at that. And if not, maybe we can change it. Not only, by the way, is Long Beach doing it, LA County also has ADRs, and I believe in their county firefighters. And from what I've heard, it's been very successful. So we need to look at that. How does the department measure success for two divisions with very different strategies? So I think we need to report back on Metro and Community Relationship Division. So a full report back, many of my colleagues brought this up, on Metro. Is it working? Is it not? What are some of the statistics? Chief Moore, you indicated we can have a report back in 4 weeks on that. What I would ask is we'd want some time to digest it and look at it, and not just bringing back to this committee first. So if it can be shared with all the committee members, maybe even a briefing with the committee members before we have it in committee, so we're not just looking at it the first time, either on a PowerPoint or a handout. I think that'd be helpful. So I'm not going to call a date certain when that happens, but if the report and those meetings can take place within the next few weeks, that would be very helpful.
That's to include contacts, arrests.
Yes. All the information that the chief indicated they have readily available or can be brought together in a report.
And where they came from.
And where they came from. Part of that is the report back on Metro Division also is where did they come from? Some of the numbers. I think it was indicated 30% earlier from patrol. Let's just see it as part of the report. We'd like to see a reopening jails plan on all 5 jails. What it would take to open all 5, to staff those. And so we'd like the department to work directly with the CAO because that's simply a matter of budget. I don't think it's anything more than that. What it would take to open all 5, or what are the priorities, and prioritize those 5. We'd like to see council district specific numbers. One of my colleagues asked for on crime stats, and moving forward, council district specific numbers, not just by division, because many divisions share different council numbers. Those baseline maps, planning department can work very closely with the department, already exist in the very same formats. It's just a matter of running them against the baseline, so they should be pretty easy to generate. We'd like to see a patrol plan target with actual deployment. This is and Councilmember Bonin, if you want to weigh in on this a little bit, but I think I've got it. But a patrol, the targeted patrol plan, we have a targeted patrol plan, and actually coming back with the actual deployment, what's been put out there, not what's planned in the future, but what's been put out there, and that will include the historical information for the past 2 years by division from deployment period to deployment period. So what was the target? What was the actual?
Yeah.
Did I capture that?
Yes. What was the target? What was the actual?
And month to month, which is
then,
DP to DP.
I mean, to start an historical one, but then it's something I think that we all benefit from seeing on a rolling regular basis, ongoing basis.
Just make a note of that. Okay. The non-emergency response information, you wanted to see the, if we could see a report. I didn't get how far back you wanted to go on that, or by division. if you want to get into, sorry, Joe, I just captured the non-emergency response. You wanted to see a report back on what's been happening in terms of everything other than emergency code 3 calls and the response times by division. Okay. And how far back were you asking on that?
Within last year.
Within the last year. So probably the last 2, so you can go to year to date.
Yep.
Okay. And then I also would like to see, Chief, the hiring, what still exists in the hiring problems with personnel, not what you've been able to fix. I know you said for the last 2 years you've understand there's been this problem. There's been this problem for the last 13 years, and it's been deep and pretty bad. And so I think they've been working towards solutions for the last 2 years, but the problem's been going on for the last dozen. And so the real question is, when it was moved back to personnel is really when the problem started. What problems are left that haven't been resolved? We'd like to hear specifically from the department on what needs to be done that's left and why it's taking so long to hire compared to other agencies. And we don't need a report on other agencies. What are the problems what's the wish list? If the department were actually running the show, what are the hiccups and the hang-ups to getting somebody from recruit to boot, right? So if you can share with us what those are. Let's just put it out there transparently once and for all so we can try to solve some of those issues.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, I remember losing some of my cadets in my academy class to other agencies soon after we graduated, and it was because of that lateral incentive. How do we do? Number one, does the police department offer those incentives, and how do that compare to other agencies that offer?
So maybe that can come back in terms of outside of just the hiring issues. Right. What are some of the other things we'll be able to do to help those? I think we captured every.
Mr. Chair,
yes, please.
If on the report in relation to AB 109 and 47.
Yes.
And Chief Moore already agreed to do this, but if we could let the record reflect in relation to also the compliance, the parole compliance unit.
Right, their activity levels.
Right, the activity levels.
The nature of the offender.
In terms of firearms recovered, narcotics discovered, rearrest, all of that. I think it'll be very helpful in relation
recidivism,
to direct
right.
and indirect consequences. Yes, I think that'll be very helpful to us with our entire approach to going after funding and just knowing factually some of the.
And just to know, Mitch, the duty that oversees the parole is a state, right? State oversees a parole program.
Yes, CDCR.
And also probation, the county oversees a probation.
They oversee the PSPs,
right.
What's traditionally known as the AB 109 offender.
I think we should hold the state and county accountable to ensure that, right?
So let's just see what it looks like on our end so that we can really have the narrative to fight.
Yeah. Okay. We're not going to adjourn this meeting. We're going to recess it for all these things to come back, and so we could reschedule it further. I think this is just going to be an ongoing, one long meeting till we get there, and whatever there is. But I want to reassure everybody of this thing. First, I want to thank you all for coming together. This is historic, and it's needed. It's the first time that we've brought all of us together at one table to have the discussions on this level, and I hope for it to continue, because I think there's only good things that can come out of everybody getting on the same page and being solution-driven. We got a problem. It needs to be solved collectively, and we're all held responsible equally to that. And so I truly appreciate the department, the league, and my colleagues spending the necessary time and attention and resources to this. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mitch.